Hello, everyone. What they feared most has happened. Russia has laid claim to 100% of Estonia. Details in our report. It happened at the exact moment when no one in Tallinn expected it. For years, Estonian politicians had grown accustomed to throwing loud accusations at Russia, issuing sharp statements, making absurd demands. All of it was treated like a political game, where they believed anything was allowed, and Moscow would remain silent. But this time, everything went differently. What Estonia had long considered a political nightmare suddenly became reality. Russia presented arguments that call into question the entirety of Estonia's territorial sovereignty, 100% of this small state's land. It all began when the Speaker of the Estonian Parliament decided to demand that Russia return certain territories. He declared that under the Tartu Peace Treaty, Russia had allegedly annexed part of Estonian land and was now obligated to give it back. The demand concerned only a few percent of territory. It was meant as a symbolic gesture, a political provocation. But the Speaker crossed a line that should never have been crossed in Tallinn. He opened an archival door that should have remained closed. He intended to shake 5%, but ended up shaking 100%. Now let us examine why Russia responded so harshly, so confidently, and so historically precisely. First, we need a roadmap. Today we will analyze 4 fundamental questions. First, what was actually written in the Tartu Treaty and why Estonia has no right to make claims. Second, why this treaty ceased to exist after Estonia joined the Soviet Union. Third, what the purchase of the Baltic lands by Peter the Great really means, and why this deal overturns the entire Estonian narrative. And fourth, why Estonia ventured into territory it should never have touched, and what Russia can now present in response. 2 intrigues we will save for the end. Why did Moscow raise this issue precisely now? And what might happen if Russia decides to go beyond legal formulations? Let us begin. When the Speaker demanded that Moscow return land, he was counting on a domestic political effect. The same scenario has long been used in the Baltic states. First, they create an artificial threat from Russia. Then they demonstrate a courageous stance by local authorities. And afterward, they try to extract another financial tranche or a military contingent from Brussels. It is a political business model. But this time, the Russian response was cold, bold, and devastatingly logical. Russia simply opened the documents. The Tartu Treaty was an agreement between the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic and Estonia, signed in the early 1920s. At that time, Russia, amid severe internal upheaval, voluntarily recognized Estonia's independence. Moreover, it renounced any property claims. In return, Estonia undertook an obligation never to make territorial claims against Russia. Never. Under no circumstances, regardless of political climate. This clause was central. It was the condition for recognizing independence. For decades, no one disputed it. But here is what was forgotten in Tallinn when they began waiving this document. The treaty ceased to exist the moment Estonia joined the Soviet Union. The state that signed the agreement ceased to exist. The legal document automatically lost its force. So when the Speaker now speaks of violations, he refers to a treaty that no longer exists. But even if it were somehow considered valid, it works against Estonia. It is Estonia that violates it first by making claims it pledged never to make. This is the first level of the legal trap Estonia set for itself. Now comes the second, much more painful level. Russia reminded everyone that in 1940 Estonia became part of the Soviet Union and was subsequently completely rebuilt and industrialized at Russia's expense. Estonia received a second life. Gas systems, power stations, ports, roads, factories, research centers. If Russia wanted to present a bill for all of this, the amount would be astronomical. But Moscow went deeper. It opened documents from even earlier, from centuries ago. And here begins a historical bomb that Estonia prefers never to discuss. All of the Baltic lands, cities, fortresses, homes, farmland, and populations were purchased by Peter the Great from the Swedish Queen Ulrika Eleonora. It was a full international transaction, not war booty, not a temporary transfer, not a disputed area. It was purchased territory, just as legally as the United States purchased Alaska. The deal was formalized, signed by both sides, and embedded in the international law of that era. This means that Estonian lands are not ancient Estonian possessions, but territories Russia once bought from a sovereign state. According to international norms, this means only one thing. If Estonia wants to talk about returning land, Russia has the right to raise the question of returning purchased territories, meaning all of them, 100% of the map. This is where panic began in Tallinn. And we are not even counting the fact that in the 20th century, Russia invested so much into Estonia that if we add up all the modernization, factories, roads, ports, and infrastructure, the total would be so immense that Estonia's very existence as a state would be impossible without acknowledging these investments. Political scientist Natalia Eliseva expressed this clearly. If Estonia seriously presents claims to Russia, then Russia can present its own, not 5% but 100% of Estonian territory. And she is right. Once historical archives and legal frameworks are opened, it becomes clear. Russia has far more grounds for claims than Estonia. Now the main question, why did Moscow raise this issue precisely now? The answer lies on the surface, but we will return to it later. And what could happen if Moscow decides to go further than historical references? Now that we have examined the legal and historical foundations, it is time to move to the most important thing. What stands behind Moscow's move? The Russian response is not emotional, not a political outburst, not a diplomatic accident. It is something much deeper. It is a signal heard not only in Tallinn. It was heard in Vilnius, Riga, Warsaw, Brussels, and Washington. Everyone who sees the Baltic states as political tools, rather than real actors, heard it. Russia demonstrated that if someone starts playing with history, it holds all the cards. If someone digs into archives, Russia has something to respond with. And if someone raises territorial issues, Russia can turn the entire topic upside down in one move. Let us look at the consequences. After the speaker's statement, Tallinn expected the usual Russian response: condemnation, a diplomatic note, maybe a sarcastic comment. Instead, Russia calmly began listing facts, each one like a blow to a doorframe. First, Estonia has no legal right to make claims because it pledged not to. Second, the Tartu Treaty no longer exists. Third, Estonia's territory was purchased by Russia in a legitimate international deal. Fourth, Russia could present financial calculations that Estonia could never recover from. Here Tallinn began to realize that Russia was not simply responding to a provocation. It was demonstrating power and legal scale that Europe preferred to ignore. Estonia is small but loud. Its foreign policy is built on one idea: protection by big players. But history is not an umbrella. History is a document. And when Russia raises documents, Estonia's umbrella turns into thin paper. Now look at the Baltic reaction. In Latvia and Lithuania, there was awkward silence. They immediately understood that if Moscow is ready to speak in historical terms, the Baltic states have no arguments. Their rhetoric is emotional, not legal. And if the conversation moves into documents, it will not end in their favor. Lithuania knows its state identity is built on interpretations that look different under scrutiny. Latvia knows a large part of its territory results from historical decisions that could be questioned legally. But Estonia took the biggest blow because it started this conversation and lost immediately. So why did Russia choose this format? Why not harsh sanctions, border closures, or economic measures? Because this format is the most painful and indisputable. It destroys mythology, not infrastructure. Mythology is the Baltic states' main resource. Their politics are built on victimhood, cultivated fear, and moral superiority. All of it disappears once documents are placed on the table. Now to our first intrigue. Why now? Several strategic reasons. First, Baltic states are deeply involved in anti-Russian initiatives, including military projects and logistics. Russia no longer tolerates rhetoric that crosses red lines. Second, Moscow sends a message to Europe. If you want to speak the language of historical claims, Russia can too. Third, Russia shows its archives are not just the past, but a present-day instrument. And fourth, the deepest reason. The world's architecture is changing. Russia is forming a new model, not defensive but offensive politically. Now the second intrigue. What happens if Russia goes further? Scenario 1. Russia limits itself to political effect. It humiliates Estonia and closes the topic. Effect achieved. Scenario 2. Russia raises territorial questions internationally, forcing the Baltics into dialogue they are not ready for. Scenario 3. Russia presents a financial bill. The costs of Soviet industrialization are sums Tallinn cannot even imagine. Scenario 4. Russia uses this precedent to pressure Europe. If Estonia violates obligations, its reliability as a partner is questioned. Scenario 5. The most frightening. Russia launches a full historical audit of post-Soviet space. Borders drawn politically could be questioned. Russia said one simple phrase: "Do not touch history if you are not ready to hear the truth." For Estonia, this sounds brutal. If Russia raises territorial questions legally, it turns out Estonia stands on land purchased by Russia. Estonia wants 5%. Russia can claim 100%. This is why Tallinn panics, why Brussels pretends nothing happened, why the Baltics are silent. Finale. Russia does not seek to take territory. It does not revise borders. It shows there are red lines. If someone tries to rewrite history, they must be ready to hear the real one. Estonia tried to play the game of big states and received an answer that put everything in place. Russia reminded them, history is not a toy. International law is not a slogan. Documents are power, sometimes louder than armies. Now the question is yours. Will Estonia learn the lesson, or will it continue playing dangerous games? This conversation is not about 5% or even 100%. It is about history being the strongest weapon if you know how to use it.